What if much of what we believe about chronic pain, weight, and willpower is missing the big picture? In today's episode, we're doing something a bit different, sharing excerpts from a powerful, deeply personal interview with Chuck Carroll, host of the Exam Room podcast, originally featured on the Fit Vegan podcast. Chuck is widely known as the weight loss champion, but his transformation goes far beyond the scale. Behind the headlines is a story shaped by addiction, trauma, invisible illnesses, and a relentless search for answers. I saw Chuck in passing at the International Conference on Nutrition and Medicine last August in Washington, D.C. At the time, I had no idea what he was quietly enduring. Like so many living with chronic pain, he was keeping up with work and life on the outside, while barely hanging on. After hearing his full story, I knew it needed to be shared here. And with May being Fibromyalgia Awareness Month, this conversation feels especially timely. Chuck opens up about living with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and a disorder of gut-brain interaction, conditions that are often overlooked, downplayed, or misunderstood, particularly in men. This is the first time I'm including clips from another podcast, but I felt it was important to bring Chuck's voice into this space. His story isn't just about weight loss, it's about the journey beneath the surface. While we've covered the impact of obesity on chronic pain in past episodes, Chuck's experience reminds us that even major diet and weight loss changes, like losing over 200 pounds and adopting a plant-based diet, aren't always enough to fully protect someone from the toll of chronic illness, trauma, and the complexities of the nervous system. As a lifestyle medicine physician, internist, and pediatrician, I've seen many of the same patterns in my patients. Unexplained pain in early life, disordered eating, vague symptoms, and years of searching for a diagnosis. Chuck puts words to what so many endure quietly. In this episode, you'll hear about the uphill battle to be taken seriously, the grief of personal loss, and what it means to live in a body stuck in survival mode. Chuck's story is not only honest and unfiltered, it's also deeply affirming and hopeful. If you or someone you care about has struggled with chronic pain, food addiction, or feeling dismissed by the healthcare system, this episode is for you. Let's dive in.
So at my heaviest, I was 420 pounds, and I'm 5'5" on a good day. And so that got me all the way up to a 66-inch waist, 6XL shirt, and chest pains, most importantly, in my early 20s. Yeah. Blood pressure out of control. I was on blood pressure medication when I was just a teenager. Like, I had barely started high school when I started to take beta blockers because it was like 180 over 100 consistently. I learned over that time that food can be as addictive as any substance out there, and I was hooked in a major way. Taco Bell, my daily fix, yeah. And I call it my fix because I do view that type of food as a drug. There could be variations in my diet throughout the other part of the day, but I had to have Taco Bell, and if I didn't, I was a grumpy Gus. See if you could picture eating all of this in one sitting. 2 7-layer burritos, 2 beef grilled stuffed burritos, a nachos Bel Grande, a chicken quesadilla, a cheesy potato burrito, and because I was a good customer, single-handedly keeping this particular Taco Bell in business, they would give me a free caramel empanada. That was one meal. Yeah. And so that was somewhere in the ballpark of close to 4,300 calories, more than 10,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 grams of fat, carved up, fatted up. I was like all kinds of upped.
At this point in his journey, Chuck wasn't yet living with chronic pain, but he was battling a severe binge eating disorder. Disordered eating is a serious and often under-recognized struggle, especially for those dealing with conditions like fibromyalgia or other chronic pain syndromes. While not everyone with chronic pain has a history of addiction, many share overlapping experiences, whether with food or other maladaptive coping mechanisms. Even in early adulthood, Chuck was already facing major health challenges, issues like hypertension and coronary artery disease that typically don't show up until much later in life. His body was sending clear signals long before formal diagnosis would come. As Chuck's health continued to decline despite conventional efforts, he began to consider gastric surgery. He shared what his eating habits looked like leading up to this point, and I think hearing it in his own words offers valuable insight.
What my menu was like as close as possible to when I had weight loss surgery. And that would have been like a half of an entire roasted chicken and 3 large sides from like a Boston market. It was roasted chicken. How bad could that possibly be? I knew macaroni and cheese probably wasn't the healthiest. And then I'd stop off at 7-Eleven and get taquitos, 6 of them, which are right by the hot dogs there, and 2 big bottles of Gatorade, drink that as a snack on my drive home. And then I would eat 1.5 to 2 pizzas and then go to Taco Bell. So that was what my menu was at my worst right before weight loss surgery. Completely out of control.
And so that's when you decided to do the surgery at that point.
Yes. I was in my early 20s, already having chest pains, knowing my family's history with heart disease. Never met my dad's dad because he died of a heart attack before I was born. My mom's dad, my granddaddy, he had a number of heart attacks, had to have quadruple bypass surgery. My own dad has had his struggles with the heart, and I was just on the heart attack superhighway, man. It was literally just a couple of days after my 27th birthday.
Chuck found himself in a place of deep desperation. With a strong family history of serious health issues, he knew he couldn't afford to wait. The risk of a shortened life felt very real and urgent. So like many others in his position, he began exploring weight loss surgery as a potential lifeline. There are 3 different types of bariatric surgery. The gastric bypass, also known as the Roux-en-Y, reroutes the digestive system, limiting both food intake and nutrient absorption. The adjustable gastric band involves placing a band around the upper part of the stomach to create a small pouch, restricting how much food can be eaten at once. And the gastric sleeve, which is what Chuck was seriously considering, involves removing about 80 to 90% of the stomach, leaving a smaller, sleeve-shaped stomach behind. In his interview, Chuck talks candidly about the moment he realized this wasn't just about weight anymore. It was about survival. The gastric sleeve, while a major decision, felt like his best chance at reclaiming his health and future.
It shrinks down. So picture this as your whole stomach, and then they just basically staple off this part and they leave you the thumb.
That original tissue from the thumb size.
So the stomach tissue is very much elastic.
Yeah.
And it's like a balloon, and you blow it up over time. It expands again. So I can put away a pretty good sized meal. I eat relatively slow, but that's about it. But I'll still eat a pretty healthy portion now. But that's what people don't realize. So if you see somebody who has weight loss surgery and they go back to eating the way that they were beforehand, it's because their stomach has expanded. They give you this menu to follow, and it really was not what I would consider healthy at all. It was certainly healthier than what I had been eating, but it was still things like, you want a snack? Roll up a piece of ham and a slice of American cheese, or here's a recipe for homemade meatloaf. And it's just, I thought that was the answer at the time, but clearly knowing what I do now, like we're missing the boat. And that's why a lot of people have to go back for a second surgery, what they call a revision surgery. I was diligent about not going back to the old way of eating. And for me at the time, that just meant no more fast food, no more fried food.
Yeah.
And so I cut that out immediately after the surgery and just made up my mind to do that. I bottomed out, and then the scale started to climb back up again. I was getting a little bit worried. And I remember going to the surgeon. The surgeon was like, "You're one of our model patients. There's a reason why we'd love for you to come and speak to new patients, because like the dude straight up prescribed me a hamburger." I never ate the hamburger because at that point I was very aware of how my brain would react to such food. And that would have been like a complete disaster. It would have been a full-blown relapse.
After undergoing gastric sleeve surgery, protein becomes the centerpiece of most recovery plans, and it's usually animal-based. Patients are often advised to prioritize foods like eggs, chicken, fish, and even protein shakes to help maintain muscle and promote healing with adjusting to a much smaller stomach. But Chuck began to realize something deeper about his own relationship with food. While these high-protein options were technically on plan, certain foods like a hamburger could trigger his addictive eating patterns. This wasn't just about nutrients anymore. It was about navigating a complex emotional and psychological connection to food. That insight led Chuck to explore a whole food plant-based diet, a way of eating that emphasizes minimally processed fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, while avoiding added oils, refined sugars, and animal products entirely. Unlike the typical post-op diet, which often leans heavily on animal proteins and includes processed products, A whole food plant-based approach focuses on nourishing the body with high fiber, nutrient-dense foods that support both physical and mental well-being. And for Chuck, it became not only a tool for physical recovery, but also a path towards healing his relationship with food.
Did you still have those strong cravings for those foods?
Yeah, man, and I still get them to this day. That's the power of food. It took a while for those cravings to not bug me as much as they once did or dictate my life, really. For whatever reason, woke up from the procedure and like all fast food was not just the enemy, but my mortal enemy. Man, it was just like, come hell or high water, I'm just never, ever going back. If I like am willing to go to this extreme,
Yeah.
like, why in the world would I want to go back? This is insane.
Be sure to stay tuned over the next 2 weeks for my interview with Heather, a therapist who specializes in binge eating disorder. Heather's personal journey is both powerful and relatable. She's lost and gained 90 pounds 3 separate times and now brings both professional expertise and lived experience to her work. Binge eating disorder is the most common eating disorder in the U.S., yet it often goes undiagnosed. It's characterized by recurring episodes of eating large quantities of food, often rapidly and to the point of discomfort, accompanied by feelings of loss of control, shame, and distress. Importantly, it's not just about the amount of food eaten, but also the emotional experience surrounding it. To meet the clinical criteria, these episodes must occur at least once a week for 3 months and include at least 3 of the following behaviors: eating much more rapidly than normal, eating until uncomfortably full, eating large amounts when not physically hungry, eating alone due to embarrassment, and feeling disgusted or depressed afterwards. Heather will unpack all of this and more: how binge eating often goes unnoticed, how it intersects with trauma and illness, and what recovery can actually look like beyond willpower and diets. You won't want to miss this conversation.
Before you had the surgery, the cravings were there,
Yeah.
but you were simply acting on them.
Correct.
But now, because of the intensity of the actions, the craving were still there, but you decided not to take action on them.
Correct.
So how did you cope with the feeling inside of you wanting to go eat those foods?
Ironically, you feel better because you're like getting rid of all that junk that had been built up in your system anyway. When you start to reintroduce food, like I remember taking a bite of just something mundane like a tuna fish sandwich and just crying because I was like the first solid food that I had had in over a month. Like literally started to cry
Yeah.
over tuna fish. The cravings for that unhealthy stuff would start to come up, but I was just resolute in following that. But if you give yourself permission to just be like grumpy and angry and upset and question like, why in the world am I craving so hard something that's so bad for me? Just give yourself permission to be normal, because that's exactly what you are. You're normal. Our brains
Yeah.
are wired to love that type of food. That takes the edge off just enough until the craving eventually subsides.
Not everyone faces food addiction, but for many living with chronic pain, there's often a history of substance use disorders. Whether it's alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, opioids, or cocaine, Chuck opens up about how these struggles can intersect. In some ways, it can be harder to adopt a healthy diet because unhealthy, highly palatable foods are not just common, they're socially accepted. Meanwhile, quitting smoking might be easier because it's no longer as visible or normalized in public spaces.
Anybody who is a former smoker can understand that, where the craving for a cigarette is really intense and very frequent initially, but over time you get fewer and fewer and fewer cravings. It's as much psychological as it is physical. So you just got to retrain the brain. And that's the simplest way to put it. But again, accept the suck, because at the time, it sucks.
Chuck made the switch to a plant-based diet, and you can hear more about how and why that happened in the full interview. He stuck with the whole food plant-based approach, but later found himself facing an unexpected battle with diagnoses of disorders of gut-brain interactions, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue syndrome. Like many living with invisible illnesses, the cause wasn't immediately clear, especially since it didn't fit into the typical biomedical model of disease. When you hear his story, you start to see why he developed these illnesses. Unfortunately, this pain-related restricted eating can make physical symptoms even worse, leading to greater disability and overall impairment. While the restriction isn't always intentional, the toll it takes physically and psychologically can mirror what we see in conditions like anorexia nervosa. In some cases, this pattern may evolve into a formal eating disorder, such as avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, also known as ARFID, which I did an episode on earlier this spring.
I got very sick, and it's been a mystery that has taken me from my local gastroenterologist to Johns Hopkins to the Mayo Clinic many times. I love the people there. Back to Hopkins, back to Mayo, and we're still searching for answers. I'd say like I'm maybe 70% of the way back, but for basically all of 2024, I wasn't really able to eat hardly anything. And so my weight plummeted all the way down to 117. They had estimated you'll have 20 pounds of extra skin. So if you subtract that, like I'm below 100 pounds. And I do have photos of me at that time without a shirt on. And it's just, I look like a friggin' skeleton. Like it was scary. And I couldn't breathe. I felt like my entire chest was on fire and just could not stop burping or anything. And I literally thought like this was the end. I had been really bloated for a couple of months leading up to that. It was excruciatingly painful. And I was living like that for a few months before everything hit the fan.
Chuck visited countless specialists and went through an exhausting array of tests, a journey that will feel all too familiar to anyone living with nociplastic pain or other chronic pain conditions. Despite his persistence, the conclusions he received were frustrating. His providers believed his diet wasn't doing any harm. In fact, they thought it should have been helping protect him. But as Chuck would come to learn, the relationship between diet and chronic pain is far more nuanced than it often appears on paper.
Given the abundance of scans and tests and everything under the sun that I've undergone.
This experience is all too familiar for many living with fibromyalgia and related conditions. Normal test results, normal physical exams, and yet very real symptoms. It's frustrating, even disheartening, to be told everything looks fine when your body tells you otherwise. So what's really going on? Chuck shares the conclusions his doctors eventually reached and how he began to make sense of an illness that defied an easy explanation.
And what the common theme is they think that basically stress broke me. Because even though I had very good control of my diet, there were portions of my life that were a complete disaster for a long time. And being ambitious and having so many life changes, very dramatic ones, just pile on top of each other, one after another. It started shortly before my wife and I got married. Her mom got really sick, was in a coma for 6 weeks. Her mom recovers miraculously. At our wedding, it's great. Shortly after that, though, she gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And that began like a 4-year slow decline, and she eventually passed. Meanwhile, my wife lost her job in TV. She was very well known in the Washington, D.C. market for a long time and was unceremoniously dumped by a station there who basically sold her a bill of goods, and she was very angry. And so I became the sounding board, the whipping post, like the outlet, and I'm a fixer. And I couldn't fix this one. And I didn't hold it against her that she was lashing out because of the circumstances, everything going on with her mom's health and now her job as well. Meanwhile, my mom was really sick. I went out to spend some time with her in the hospital when she almost died. And that's pretty stressful. I'm trying to work out some old childhood trauma that had happened. And so Julie and I were just butting heads, and I'm trying to grow the show. The show's doing fantastic, but I was not sleeping. I was not exercising. The only thing I was doing was eating healthy. And that's when I realized food is hugely, massively important, but it ain't everything. And my body broke. And so one of the theories that the doctors have is a newer diagnosis called a DGBI, which is a disorder of the gut-brain interaction. And my brain is basically stuck in fight or flight mode.
Nociplastic pain syndromes are marked by chronic pain lasting more than 3 months, along with fatigue and brain fog, also known as cognitive impairment. Chuck describes his brain fog as more than just feeling tired or distracted. It was a deep mental fog that made even simple tasks feel overwhelming, affecting his ability to focus, remember, and think clearly.
I feel drunk or stoned a little bit. And this is the part of it that doctors have not yet figured out. It's super ultra sensitive. And whenever, like that gets agitated a little bit, like symptoms can range from heartburn to this crazy brain fog. And I don't like that term because it's so generic. And I think brain fog is a little bit different for everybody. But for me, it is literally like being drunk or stoned without the actual inebriation. And that comes with a great deal of, at least initially, a great deal of anxiety because I didn't know when I would feel normal again, if I would ever feel normal again. I would just cry all day, every day, uncontrollably for a very long time before they keyed in on some of the treatments that we're doing right now, which have calmed my nerves down. Yeah, because my nervous system is shot. So when I say calm my nerves down, it's not just feeling nervous.
Chuck discusses the various methods he's found helpful in calming his nervous system, which plays a crucial role in managing chronic pain. He explains how these techniques, like deep breathing and mindfulness, help him gain some control over his body. But the pain itself is far from simple. He describes how it doesn't just stay in one place. While it often affects his stomach, it also radiates to other parts of his body. This widespread pain adds layers of complexity to his condition, making it harder to pinpoint and manage effectively.
It's like literally my nerves are super hypersensitive. So it's like I could squeeze your finger, be like, oh, he's squeezing my finger. But to me, it might feel like
You're
being
getting
hit with a
attacked.
hammer. And that's just the way that my insides are right now.
In a landmark 2003 study entitled Increased Pain Sensitivity in Fibromyalgia, Effects of Stimulus Type and Mode of Presentation, fibromyalgia was placed under the scientific spotlight. During this study, researchers applied pressure to the thumbnail with gradually increasing intensity while using functional MRI scans to observe brain activity. What did they find? People with fibromyalgia reported pain at half the pressure level compared to the control group. But here's the fascinating part. Both groups showed activation in the same part of the brain, and the distress was equally visible in those with fibromyalgia. It indicates that for those with fibromyalgia, the brain and central nervous system were misinterpreting normal pressure signals as harmful. Essentially, the brain was amplifying sensations that weren't actually dangerous, leading to pain where there should have been none. This discovery was pivotal because it shifted the understanding of fibromyalgia from just a condition of physical discomfort to one that also involves an altered processing of pain in the brain. It also helped lay the groundwork for a more comprehensive view of chronic pain, showing that it's not just about injury or inflammation, but also how the brain perceives and processes pain signals.
I've consulted with so many doctors, and I'm so grateful to be in the position that I'm in, where I have access to this extraordinary level of care. I would not be this far along in my journey if it wasn't for the likes of Dr. Will Bolsowitz, who behind the scenes, like I'm forever in his debt.
One expert whose work I often recommend is Dr. Will Bolsowitz, a board-certified gastroenterologist and author of the best-selling book, Fiber Fueled. This book is an excellent resource, especially for those living with chronic gastrointestinal issues like IBS, bloating, or discomfort that can feel overwhelming and confusing. Dr. Bolsowitz dives into the science of the gut microbiome and explains how a fiber-rich plant-based diet can play a transformative role in gut health. What I appreciate most about his approach is that it's not only evidence-based, but also deeply compassionate. He understands how disruptive these conditions can be to daily life. If you're navigating chronic GI symptoms or looking to improve your digestive health, Fiber Fueled is a book I strongly encourage you to check out.
Dr. Brian Carlson at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Iris Wang, who's taken such good care of me at Mayo.
Dr. Iris Wang's research focuses on disorders of the gut-brain axis, what used to be called functional gastrointestinal disorders. Her work is at the forefront of uncovering how the brain and digestive system are in constant communication and how disruptions in that relationship can lead to chronic conditions like IBS, bloating, and abdominal pain. This research is especially important for those living with fibromyalgia and other chronic pain syndromes, where gut symptoms often overlap with fatigue, mood changes, and widespread pain. Understanding the gut-brain connections opens up new avenues for treatment, ones that go beyond just managing symptoms and instead addresses the root cause of the dysfunction.
Dr. Drossman, the Dross, as Will calls him, who just retired but put me on this path with the DGBI.
Dr. Douglas Strassman is one of the leading experts in what we now call disorders of the gut-brain interaction, or DGBIs for short. Over his career, Dr. Drossman has authored hundreds of peer-reviewed publications and books, and he's lectured around the world, helping to advance understanding and treatment of these often misunderstood conditions. Chuck shares a significant GI distress he experienced, something I know many of you can relate to. His story really highlights just how life-disrupting these symptoms can be, and why this area of medicine deserves so much more attention.
Whenever I would eat anything, the symptoms would just rage. And I just decided I would rather whittle away than feel so sick. And I still felt like crap anyway. Even when I would drink water, the symptoms would just wash over me horrifically.
Living with intense gastrointestinal distress can be incredibly challenging, physically and emotionally. Even though Chuck had already been following a whole food, plant-based diet, he found that he had to reintroduce those foods very gradually. This is something many people don't realize. When your gut is in a state of imbalance, even the healthiest foods can be difficult to tolerate at first. One reason is that the levels of beneficial gut bacteria may be low, making it harder to digest high-fiber foods comfortably. While I'm not certain of Chuck's exact treatment plan, it likely included at least some foundational education about chronic pain and the gut-brain interaction. What's clear is the impact it's had. He began to better understand his body and work with it rather than against it.
This treatment that I'm on now enabled me to start reintroducing foods, and we were very cautious at first, but now I'm pretty much back to eating what I had been eating before I got sick, which is great. Like, I freaking love food.
For many of you living with invisible illnesses like Chuck's, the journey is ongoing. That's exactly why this podcast and the title of my book is called Conquering Your Fibromyalgia. It's not about a quick fix, but about learning how to navigate and manage these complex conditions day by day. Chuck opens up about what the ongoing battle looks like for him, something that will likely resonate with many of you listening.
But thankfully, knock on wood, like, we're at a point now where there are times when it barely happens. And that is sweet. That is a good day when that happens. And sometimes I'll get 2 or 3 of those days in a row, and I'm like, oh man, that's so good. And then boom, back to reality after a while. But compared to where I was, just uncontrollably crying and like trying to keep doing the show, I missed very few shows while I was super sick.
Chuck's openness in sharing his struggles is incredibly meaningful for the fibromyalgia and invisible illness community. His story helps shine a light on an important truth. While about 40% of people living with fibromyalgia are men, far fewer actually seek help. That's often due to stigma, misunderstanding, or not feeling safe enough to speak up. By hearing Chuck's journey, I hope more men will feel empowered to talk to their physicians, and that more healthcare providers will recognize the importance of a truly holistic, compassionate care. That's one of the main goals of this podcast, to inform, inspire, and equip you with tools that help you live with less suffering and more living, even in the face of invisible illness.
The thing that honestly I've been thinking about is how big of a role stress plays in this. And you cannot eat your way out of stress. You just can't do it. When you become a patient at the Mayo Clinic and they ask, what your expectations are, and I just wrote, I want to feel normal.
Instead, the focus often shifts to something more realistic, feeling even a little better, having more good days than bad, and regaining pieces of life that once felt lost. And that shift in expectation doesn't mean giving up. It means adapting and finding new ways to thrive.
That's all I want, because I know how sweet normal can feel. People absolutely take it for granted every day. This brain fog stuff is happening, then so be it. It's just, bro, I'm so hardwired to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And so it's now my life's mission is to figure this thing out.
Yeah.
And so what else can we try? And I know, worst case scenario, I can fall back to exactly what it is I'm doing now and at least get back to 70, 80%, somewhere in that ballpark, close to normal. But I would love to get to 90, even 100%, man.
Many people living with chronic pain syndromes often describe an internal drive, a kind of hardwiring that makes it difficult to slow down or rest. Listening carefully, many feel this ironic twist of feeling extreme fatigue mixed with the restlessness. They can't seem to sit for long before they get uncomfortable, need to have to move around before they get too stiff, and the pain builds up. This often continues at night, disrupting sleep. There is a reason soldiers are limited to less than 6 months of staying in battle before being relieved to help limit the development of combat fatigue. It's as if they constantly feel the need to be doing something, to stay productive, even when their bodies are asking for pause. Chuck opened up about this tendency and offered some powerful insights into how it's shaped his experience with illness and healing.
That's still my fatal flaw. It feels awkward to do nothing.
You feel guilty for not doing anything.
Yeah. The other portion we haven't talked about this is one of the other myriad of diagnoses that they've given me is chronic fatigue syndrome. And so it's like my battery pretty consistently feels drained, especially because, again, you think about it, it makes sense. If your brain is stuck in fight or flight mode, even though you're asleep, you're not charging all the way. Let's run down like all the diagnoses here. And this will probably tell you like how much I would love that, the sleep thing. They gave me fibromyalgia. They've gave me like a diaphragmatic dysfunction where basically my diaphragm slips out of place and puts a little bit of pressure on my lungs. And that could be what's triggering the shortness of breath symptoms that I have. The chronic fatigue syndrome, the DGBI. Yeah, those are the big ones.
I'll be diving deeper into chronic fatigue syndrome in an upcoming series, but for now, let me just say this. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome are often considered two sides of the same coin. Both are part of the broader category of nociplastic pain syndromes. You'll be hearing from Dr. Avindra Nath, the lead investigator of a recent NIH study on chronic fatigue syndrome, as well as Dr. Joel Young, who's done significant research in this area. They'll be sharing groundbreaking discoveries that are not only relevant to Chuck's experience, but also to many of you listening who can relate to the challenges he faces. These insights are important for anyone living with these conditions. Chuck has long been a public advocate for the benefits of a plant-based diet, but he also opens up about some of the painful experiences he's faced, particularly regarding the return of weight struggles. Unfortunately, even those who've been successful in their health journeys can face hurtful comments, which just goes to show the complexity of living with chronic illness.
There is an extraordinary amount of pressure that comes with being the quote-unquote weight loss champion, but the comments are a dagger. She said, I asked before but didn't get a response. Do you know what is contributing to starting for you to gain the weight back? I am asking from a good place, no judgment. As someone who has lost almost 300 pounds, I understand how easily we can gain weight back if we do not focus 100%. If I can be a resource, let me know. I enjoy your podcast, but continuing to share the same message of whole food, plant-based, no oil, and when we see you gaining weight, it seems disingenuous as folks don't normally gain weight when they're eating a whole food, plant-based, no oil diet. I think speaking about it and sharing would help your audience understand and also offer you support. Yeah. That pissed me off.
It's hard to read because you know that you're doing everything right. You know that you're working really hard. You're working on your nervous system. You're working with all these doctors. You're eating whole food, plant-based. You're eating clean. You're not deviating.
Normally, I don't respond. This one just sent me through the roof. We can never grow this movement if we continue to have judgmental attitudes toward others. Any judgment cast based on incorrect assumptions is dangerous, divisive, and infuriating. While you have soured my day, I still hope you have a blessed one.
It feels like people are looking to fault like the whole food plant-based movement. Maybe because maybe some of them are a part of it, but they don't fully believe it. So they're looking for that little, it doesn't work because I saw this. But again, they don't get the full picture of what is happening. And health is a lot more complex than just nutrition.
100%. And that's what I learned. I put all of my plant-based eggs in the proverbial egg basket of nutrition. I wish I would have put some in some other buckets there too, man, because then perhaps we'd be talking about something much different today. It'd be easy to throw in the towel here. There were days, bro, when I honestly did throw in the towel. Like I wasn't actively going to do anything about it, but I resigned myself. If I'm going to die, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I will never forget one day being at the doctor's office at Johns Hopkins, one of the greatest medical facilities in the entire world. And I asked the doctor that day if I was going to die, and she said she did not know. When you have a leading medical professional tell you, like, they can't say for certain whether or not you're going to die, that's pretty disconcerting. And like, my primary care physician was like, Chuck, I've done everything that I can for you, man. If you need a prescription refill, call me. Other than that, you're in the hands of other people now.
Yeah.
And it's just, is this really my life?
I think having a strong supportive partner makes a big difference.
Huge. Couldn't have done this without Jules. I tried to shield her from a lot of this for a while. She was grieving her mom. And so I actually went and moved in with my mom immediately after I took my gallbladder out last February because I thought that was the problem. Was not the problem.
So you could have kept it.
Come to find out. Yeah. I've been told that in no uncertain terms. It's like the surgeon was like, the gallbladder was angry.
This is a common experience for many people with disorders of the gut-brain interaction. Surgery is often seen as a solution, but all too often the symptoms remain or even get worse. It's a pattern we also see in what's known as failed back surgery syndrome, where someone may go through multiple surgeries with little to no relief, and sometimes things actually get worse.
And so it's like when I woke up from the surgery, I was like, oh, great, we finally got it.
Felt the same.
And like major panic attacks in the hospital. They thought that I was coding just because I was having like just such a crazy panic attack. Just no good.
What are new things that you've implemented to help alleviate that?
One, I've cut way back on the number of hours that I've worked. And even though that has cost us downloads and views, like my colleagues have been nothing but supportive of them. God bless them. I have a hard cap, like right at 40 hours.
What were you doing before?
Oh my God, like 65, 70, 80.
Oh, wow.
I was just like long days.
Yeah.
You know, partially of my own doing because I was trying to escape into that to not have to deal with everything else that was
Like the
going
hard
on.
things.
Yeah, but success is addictive.
It is, and it's a very good distraction.
Yes.
It's easy to run to it.
Chuck shares other strategies he has tried to help alleviate his chronic pain.
I tried acupuncture, really like that, and then insurance was like, oh, we're not going to cover it. I never thought that I would be like much of a yoga guy, but it's been a godsend. There's been this great place in the small town where my wife and I live now in Southern Maryland where it's just like the coolest people, really chill, and then hopping on the treadmill again is a lot of fun. And then finding like going back and just like rewatching some of these old shows that I grew up watching, you've seen them 100 times, but it's like comfort food without the calories.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm at a point where I can watch an old episode of Perry Mason or something and not like just mindlessly eat. Like I can just sit there and sip water or a cup of coffee and just be as content as can be. I just want to get back to normal, and I don't want to lose sight of what normal was. It's like, I'm so grateful to be here today and feel the way that I do. It's far from perfect, but it's also a far way from when I was at my worst.
Yeah.
And so that gives me hope to keep marching forward as well. If I've made this much progress over the last 6-7 months, then what's the next 6 or 7 months going to look like? Hopefully there's going to be a radical transformation in there. I'm going to be working hard to try to right the ship and get the body back under control, get more comfortable there. And I think having a stronger body is only going to serve me even better.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great stress release with all the exercises you're going to put me through. And I'm just looking forward to it.
On this podcast, we often talk about the biopsychosocial, spiritual, environmental approach to understanding and navigating invisible chronic pain conditions. Chuck shared his own spiritual perspective, asking those big questions. Is there a reason? Is there a purpose behind all of this?
I'm not a huge man of faith, but I will say, like, I do believe that I was given this challenge for a reason, and that is to help other people. I think I'm just wired for resilience and just like to keep going and to be that role model for others. And the people who I have no idea who they are, but they're struggling right now, that's who I'm fighting equally hard for, is to get right so I can share this story with a happy ending and get them going on the right page too.
At the heart of this podcast, that's who I'm really fighting for. Those quietly living with invisible illnesses. If Chuck's story offered you even a moment of validation, clarity, or hope, then I'm grateful. You're not alone. I invite you to explore the other episodes and stay with us as we continue to shine a light on invisible illnesses, the unseen realities so many carry every day. And thanks to Max Seguin, the host of the Fit Vegan podcast, for bringing Chuck's story to the public. Please check out his podcast and check out the Exam Room podcast. the go-to plant-based medicine podcast.